My name's Peter Lacy. I'm Senior Managing Director at Accenture, and I am delighted to be joined here today by an all-star cast to discuss the circular economy. This is a panel made up of the winners and the judges and the co-chairs from last night's Circular Economy Awards, the Circulars, and I think we had a fantastic set of winners, a really interesting showcase of innovation last night. So we thought we'd invite you along and have a discussion about what it really takes to scale circular economy. What are some of the innovations you've been focused on? What are some of the barriers? What are some of the opportunities moving forward? So let me introduce the panel to you. So let me start with Ida Auken, who is a Member of Parliament in Denmark and was previously the Environment Minister. Matanya Horowitz, who is the founder of AMP Robotics. Peter Van Der Poel, who is the Managing Director of IKEA Range and Supply. And finally, Sander van Wijk, who is the Head of Sector Advisory at ABN AMRO. And I'm pleased to say that all three of your businesses last night were winners, and Ida very kindly hosted the evening very, very well indeed. So let me start by asking you, Ida, from your perspective, what do you consider to be the most important innovation that you have contributed to the circular economy? And indeed, whether that's in your role as a minister or as an MP, what's the role of public policy in driving innovation?
I think public policy should look at what's already happening. So the waste streams we have today, to get them to be recycled. So basically set really high standards for recycling, not talk about waste, but talk about resources, but also start to move up to the next level to see how can we move it to circular economy by actually adding design principles, new business models, and pushing business to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And one thing would be, for instance, in a European context, to set new standards for the longevity of products, to set standards for how much plastic should be recycled in just maybe 10 years from now, mm-hmm. and what kind of categories do we want plastic to move in, so mm-hmm. we get more of a similar system across industries. Mm.
So setting the frame, setting the boundaries, providing nudges, and where necessary, providing regulation makes a lot of sense. And Sander, let's come to you. So as a global bank, so your role is sector advisory, what would you say has distinguished you? You were winner last night in terms of the banking and the financial services sector. What has distinguished you? What's your contribution been to circular economy?
What I would like to say to that is that I think we're at a time where we are ready to move from thought leadership into action leadership, where I think for the first time you see, we've been talking about it for a number of years, but you see real life business models that make sense, also commercially. And for the banking sector, I think that's really a game changer. So at the middle of last year, we said, we see this, we need to act upon this. And if we want to make sure that we match the speed with which we see these developments going on, we can't set incremental steps, but we need to put a leap out there. So really to say, listen, if we're going to do this, let's go in there. And that's why we said in 2020 we want to finance at least 1 billion assets, at least 100 deals, and it produced at least.
And are you on the way?
Yes, actually, we were talking to the team yesterday, and so far we've completed 14 transactions with over 83 million in investments.
Right.
And we started in the summer, so most of the deals were actually completed in the last 4 months. So I think what we see is really going on, and yeah, it's practically happening.
Well, we at the Circulars are very happy to broker deals. Here's two businesses that maybe need some financing that can help you get to your target somewhere along the lines.
Discussions already, so.
For a cut, obviously, towards the Circulars. And so Peter, tell us, so IKEA, winner of the multinational category, been doing some phenomenal things, but what would you single out as being IKEA's real contribution to circular economy?
I think there are a couple of things important here. One thing is that we have been working with our material agenda for a long time. Being very conscious on how we can make sure that we are using the scarce resources in a very conscious way. Then I think we try to apply all of the principles across the whole business. We look on how and where we meet customers, thinking about both selling, reselling, different ways of ownership, where we are testing and verifying different things. We are looking in...
what do you mean by that? So give us an example, different types of ownership. What does that mean?
We could think about also offering services where it's not that much about selling the product only, but selling also the lifetime with the product, taking responsibility for that, where we are also exploring different ways of doing that. We have identified the design principles where we look also on how we can, from the start in the beginning of every new product, we have around 9,500 products, create opportunities to also make every product circular, looking at the materials we use, but also looking at repairing, upgrading, adapting during lifetime, and in the end, of course, also taking back again. So that's another aspect where we're also very consciously looking into. And then the last part, of course, was also how can we be part of also the work that's ongoing of also mapping the availability of circular resources. We've done work also together with you to identify what are prioritized materials, selecting those, engaging ourselves with other partners in making sure where are we ourselves taking things back into our supply chain and where are we part of other supply chains where we can also make a difference.
And I want to come back to that in a second, because one of the things that we've talked about, I think last night, we also had a lunch today, it was off the record, so I can't say exactly what we talked about, but I think it's fair to say that we talked about collaboration and the fact that actually the boundaries of organisations need to be spanned in many cases to make these business models work. So let's come back to that in a second. So finally, in the first round, so on to Matanya. Now, for all of us recovering geeks who never actually got to put in practice, tell us, your business is phenomenal. I mean, the idea of robotics fits very much with the fourth industrial revolution theme that we've been looking at through the circular economy. But tell us about your business. Tell us about what contribution it makes.
Absolutely, and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I hope everybody has a little bit of an inner geek. So at AMP Robotics, we are making robotic systems for recycling. These robots go inside existing recycling facilities and help them automate the sorting process with practically no retrofit to their existing operations. So we sort bottles, cans, cardboard, we can even do wood, aluminum, you name it. So our contribution is to help automate a core part of the circular economy inside the recycling process. It ends up, this is a pretty big pain point for the recycling industry. So we're helping them kind of reduce costs, help improve purity, and also by automating it, ask a little bit less of the consumer when they try to recycle material. The less you ask of the consumer, the harder you make life for the recycling facilities, but the more participation you can count on. And so we hope we can help make that sorting process within these recycling facilities a little bit more scalable.
And presumably something that can be deployed anywhere in the world. I mean, we have similar kinds of challenges, although there are different municipal and different systems in waste. That's a pretty recurring challenge, right?
Absolutely. No, we see it as a solution that can be universally applied. There are many different kinds of technology out there, but what distinguishes robotic systems is that they can actually be deployed with very little friction. You can design these systems so that they kind of fit into existing processes. And what that means is that for an existing facility, they can begin to upgrade and automate and improve without redesigning how they do things.
Right, so it's not huge, it's not something that requires an entire re-capex, investment. Actually, it's something that can be fitted on it. Okay, very good, very good. Well, let's sort of take a different turn with this, which is, I don't think anyone here has rose-tinted spectacles or thinks that this is all, as we would say in English, all gravy, all good. I think if we look at if you look, for example, last night, one of the winners was Frans van Houten, the CEO of Philips, and he talked about a report that had recently come out of the Circular Economy Organization in the Netherlands, which said that only as much as 9% of global goods are actually circular in nature. I think that might even be actually quite aggressive. So there are some pretty big challenges ahead of. What are some of the challenges, let's start with you, Peter. What are some of the challenges that keep you up at night in terms of really implementing circular in your business? And what are some of the challenges that remain unsolved?
I think if we think about the challenges we face at the moment, of course, it is to look at the diversity of materials that we are working with and then understanding what would be alternatives that truly are recyclable. How can we actually get into a scale of availability that we are looking for? How can we make sure that we can fit it into our production and also get the properties right to make sure that it also fulfills customers' expectations, because they still want to have great quality products that are long-lasting and look beautiful. So I think that's things where we also see that we need to continuously work. And the thing where we also, I think, start to realize is this is not something we can lead by ourselves. Here we need to collaborate, co-create, both with our customers, where we are much more also starting to co-create solutions for living a more sustainable life, but also with universities, governments, other partners to be able to find those solutions and also being able to invest together to scale up and hopefully also not lock too many of those technologies and materials in with patents, so that actually we make it not accessible for us to move together.
So sort of an open IP model that others can use and deploy.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think that's critical for us to move forward here, because we have still many questions that are unresolved. And I think we will need to collaborate to find those answers in the next years.
And give us an example. You talked about collaboration, and I asked earlier about that topic, across borders. You mentioned collaboration with customers, collaboration with supply chain partners. Anything that comes to mind as a practical example of collaboration for you?
Well, we work together, I think, with, for instance, lots of universities in finding now, for instance, new fibers that can replace fossil-based textiles. And that's one of the areas where we...
the next generation of materials.
Yes, we need to look at feedstock, we need to look at the agriculture, we need to work with different partners to find out also how do we create there a scale also that has a total impact that is still also positive. So that's an area where we are working, and I think it's in many of those topics that we find that it is about collaborating and reaching out.
Sander, what keeps ABN AMRO up at night in terms of the challenges?
I would say I wouldn't say keeping us up.
You look like a man who sleep well.
I sleep well, but certainly.
What are the challenges?
Yeah, there are a few. One, the amount of deals out there, the amount of businesses who are able to set up a commercial viable business case. They're out there, but compared to, let's say, general economy, they're still not a whole lot. And it's important that we support that, because the more there are, the more experience you get, and getting experience is key. The second thing is in terms of financing themselves. So when you look at these type of structures, they're different from what we do currently.
So like average, a sort of a leasing model or a product as service?
Yeah, you see on average longer tenors. You see more ecosystem-based type of financing. The real traditional way of financing is bilateral financing. You lend something to a company, the company repays you. Here you see it's more of an interaction between players, more project finance type of oriented structures. So that's different. And in particular for a bank the real job of a bank is risk management. So then that's where you like to have data to make sure you're in control.
So you're sort of quite early in the learning cycle in the industry to understand how to value some of these deals, how to assess the risk in these deals.
And that's one of the reasons we've now created what we call a circular envelope, where we've said we have 100 million euros. In terms of investment money that we can finance company to make sure we monitor what's going on with these companies and also help build up their business model, also to make sure we're going to get to that billion in 2020.
So it's sort of an experimental phase for the sector as a whole as it kind of gets to grip with the transition to circular economy?
It's experimental, but at the same time it needs to make sense. But you can think of let's say a normal non-circular deal is maybe 5 years, but when you change it because it's a product as a service model and suddenly becomes 12 years, that's a different risk perspective. So we want to make sure that we have a keen understanding what's going on, that we can not just make sure we are being repaid, but more important that we actually learn from what's going on. Because I think what's crucial here is that you take one deal at a time, you take the learnings from that deal, make sure you internalize those learnings and use them for a next deal. That's the best way to move forward.
Sense, And what's going on in the Netherlands? Like, this is the 3 in a row now. 3 banks in a row in the Netherlands have all won the Circular Economy Finance Prize. Are you going to open up the market to some other countries? Or but it's a slightly serious question. I mean, why
it is. And to be honest, I think water management is one of the real export products of the Netherlands.
Well, it's like 200, 300 years old of managing
exactly, but
water
you
risk.
Never know. I think circular could be the next thing, because we were just talking about the ecosystem. I think the Netherlands has a really good ecosystem. And one, you have the government who's has a very ambitious path. They want to be fully circular by 2050, and by 2030, 50% of resources have to come from renewables. You have the finance systems, which is looking at it. You have technology, a blockchain, Internet of Things, which is driving this. So it's a really interesting melting pot.
Well, that's the ecosystem point. And having now given the Netherlands a plug, I'll have to give the last word to Ida on Denmark and to tell us all the good things that are going on there. But so must be very different challenges. Your business is now 3 years in, something like that. So, you know, very innovative, fast-growing, new technologies, but different challenges. But what are the biggest challenges that keep you up at night? I hope, as an entrepreneur, I wouldn't be surprised if they do keep you up at night. But
No, plenty of sleepless nights. You know, fortunately, things are staying exciting. You know, in the short term, you know, many technical issues that we run into. We're trying to expand the scope of what we're doing as fast as possible. But thinking over the longer term, the mission of AMP Robotics is to change the fundamental economics of recycling. And so to do that, we really want to be a part of pushing the industry forward and really contributing to the circular economy. What that means is we think a lot about the incentives our customers have and the ecosystem around them. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how end markets are developing for them, how commodity prices are fluctuating, and ensuring that you know, the value of what they're doing, you know, the externalities, you know, created by recycling are really you know, being properly captured or at least somehow recognized as they, you know, compete on these very competitive you know, commodity markets. So that's something we think about a lot, and we are a little insulated from that as an equipment supplier, but from what we see, all the trends actually seem to be in the right direction. We see a lot of fantastic programs, different partnerships, different public-private sector collaborations that we think are moving things in a positive direction, allowing those contributions to be recognized.
very good. Well, look, I'll definitely let you have your Denmark plug. But I mean, this is an interesting, as a policymaker, some of these challenges are quite clearly market failures that maybe require intervention from a policymaker. Some of them actually probably not. You know, actually the markets are working well. Others where there might be interesting nudges or even, you know, as procurers of huge amounts of goods and services in society, you may have a role in. But how would you respond to some of these challenges, and what are the challenges for a government looking at some of these?
So the biggest challenge and what keeps me up at night is, of course, the scale of the problem. I mean, going back to 9% of the materials worldwide being circulated, and the growth we are seeing right now happening at a speed, you know, that we cannot imagine. China using more concrete in 4 years than US did in a whole century. I mean, just to get the magnitude of the problem. So I think we have to see what happened in climate change. I think we are where we were 15 years ago.
To learn from.
Yeah, because 15 years ago, this is where we were with climate change. There was a growing understanding that this is a big problem. Business was going into it. But the good thing is that businesses have learned from that round. So they get it now, that environment and business does not have to be contradictory. You can have growth and sustainability at the same time. That's a very good starting point, which means we have more legitimacy as policymakers to go in and get the incentives right. So what keeps me up at night is actually, where's the political leadership? Because actually we see a lot of industry that wants to move, and they're looking for us to create that level playing field, to have public procurement who can buy into these systems. I love your system because I was told so many times as minister, there's no technology. You can't set so ambitious standards for sorting out waste and separation because there's no technology that can get black plastics out of the stream and all of that. So when I hear these you know, innovations, it actually helps me go back and say, yes, we can set more aggressive standards. Yes, industry is ready. Yes, the public wants to go there. People want to sort their waste and recycle. So I think we are in a very good point in history. And if I was a business, I would invest right now, because I'm sure that the next 3, 4, 5 years, this is going to go
Which is a
through the roof.
perfect segue into action. Maybe you get 2 bites of the cherry, Ida. The first one is, what do you think? I mean, you were Environment Minister, and you obviously saw the different phases of the debate emerge and then Paris Agreement and so on. But what do you think was the most important learning from the climate change process and the maturing of the climate change process that you think would be a takeaway for circular economy?
So we need a clear vision. We had the vision that we should be free of carbon in 2050.
Like 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees?
Yeah, but even something that people, this is like the temperature, we don't really control that.
Right.
Like we can control what we do.
Right.
So let's say we want to clear our economy from carbon in 2050. The same way we want to clear our economies from waste. So everybody kind of with buy-in from both sides of the political spectrum, saying this is where we're going. 2050, no more waste.
Yeah.
And then set the standards on the way there, looking at R&D incentives, looking at, you know, regulatory barriers. It's hard to recycle plastics sometimes because there are demands for other areas like to use plastics for these road markers. You might have a standard for traffic safety says has to be this white, and then it's hard to use recycled plastics. Get stuff like that out of the way. There's a lot of things stuck in old regulation that actually prevents circular economy from happening. And then I think there's, really a big thing to be done about measurement. Because right now people want to do this, but they don't know which measurement to do it within. So if governments could say, this is how we measure circular economy, I think that would be a big step forward.
Very good. And as we've heard, there are those out there now starting to look at that. And I think you're right. There isn't that unifying goal at the moment in terms of the vision. That makes a lot of sense. So this is where I get to play evil moderator. In one sentence, each of you, can you summarise what you think is the most important action that's required to scale circular economy at speed? And it can be as micro as you like or as macro as you like. And we'll begin with you.
Single sentence. I would say continued investment by the private sector into end markets and the purchase of recycled goods. That's my sentence. Can I elaborate?
You can explain this, absolutely, yeah. There are a couple of good conjunctions in there as well for you if you need to stretch the sentence. Absolutely, no, explain.
Thank you. The recycling industry is advancing very quickly. New technology, a lot of know-how that's kind of dispersing from great operators. But what has a lot of power is when they have a lot of pull for these different goods. Mm-hmm. If that pull exists, then all the incentives line up. Everybody wants to participate in a good way. And what's been very edifying and fantastic to see is that a lot of brands and those who produce the materials are actually very motivated because of I think a sincere desire to do the right thing, but also because they are motivated by kind of the educated consumer who cares about these things. And they're creating programs where they will pull in these materials, and that makes a substantial difference to the industry itself.
Very good. So investing in the end consumer process and the demand flows, and right, okay, very good.
Thank you.
Peter.
I think first and foremost, taking a leadership role, really daring to take a stance on what you want to move. I think making sure that it doesn't end only in the management level, but that it also ends in the core of your operations throughout your organization. And then share and collaborate, because this is something that we can only do together. So reach out, involve, co-create to be able to make the movements.
Yeah, and your open IP point, I think, speaks very much to that as well. Tana.
I would say maybe a little bit less thought leadership and just start acting. I was spoken to Mr. McDonough yesterday, who I think in '73 wrote the book Cradle to Cradle. That's quite a while ago.
The principles have been there a while, right?
Yeah, and as for our organization, just jump into the pool. It looks like it's cold water. Jump in there. It's warm enough. It's nice enough. And when you're in there, you don't want to get out.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Ida.
For me, it's to have governments and political leaders play the convening role of actually getting all these actors together and say, this is where we are going, you play which role, and we all need to play a role. And for that to happen, to get the citizens, the people, to want to do this, because I think they're the most important part. They're going to have to buy the products and recycle and see the meaning of this actually helping solve the planet's problems.
Well, thank you very much indeed to all of my panelists. Congratulations to ABN AMRO, to IKEA, to AMP Robotics. And it falls upon me really to just close by turning it back to you, the audience. Each of the panelists, I think, has succinctly described what's required to really shift from theory into action. And I hope that you've taken away some ideas, and I hope that at least one of those ideas will stick and inspire you to act in your organisation in whatever way you can to take the circular economy to scale at speed.